and welcome to this week's yoga class. We'll start off with a short introduction to posture, and then we'll apply those principles into different poses as we move into our asana segment. So there are three basic things that we need for good posture, and we need all three. They work together. So if you just do one or two of the three, you solve one problem, but you create a new set of problems. And so rather than address them separately, I'm going to address all three together. That means it's a lot of information. So even though I'll be covering a lot of ground, it'll be up to you to come back and practice them until you move them into muscle memory, and then they become more effective. Okay? So what are the three elements? The first one is the arches. And when we're standing, that's the arches of the feet. If you're doing a handstand or downward facing dog, it's the arches of the hands and of the feet, whatever is in contact with the floor. Okay? The second thing is learning how to spiral the limbs, which is the legs and the arms. And as we create the arches in the feet, we spiral the legs. That creates a new set of problems in the core, and we address those by employing the three bandhas. And we'll examine each of those bandhas in turn. And when you can engage the arches, the spirals, and the bandhas simultaneously, everything else drops into place. When you can do that in a simple pose like Tadasana, like standing in Tadasana, or other poses, you'll find that you can begin to move them and take these same ideas of the spirals, the arches, and the bandhas. You'll find that they improve downward facing dog, crow pose. Almost any pose will benefit from some of these elements being introduced into your pose. So let's start with the arches. So we want to create an arch that runs down the length of the leg and also the transverse arch. To find the longitudinal arch, try pointing the big toe up and push through the ball of the big toe down at the same time. If I turn sideways and do that, you'll see that as I lift the big toe up, the arch starts to engage. If I let the big toe down and let the arch collapse, that's collapse. So I point the big toe up, I root here, and this should start to lift a little bit. Now with practice, you don't bother with lifting the big toe. You just engage the arch. You push down here, you lift here. With a little practice, this becomes more natural to you. The transverse arch is a little harder to find. To really begin to activate it, you anchor the big toe, flare the little toes out wide. Watch the width of my foot. Notice that I grab the floor of the big toe, flare out. Then I lift these middle three toes higher, and I keep pushing down through the ball of the big toe and the big toe and lifting these three high. Now before you do anything else, you have to find the little toe with your mind. So then try to just wiggle and see if you can find the little toe, and when you find it, begin to root down through the little toe and lift the middle three. So on this foot you can see, I can get my fingers under the middle three, big toe, little toe rooted. Okay. Now when you're able to do this with one leg and then with the other, you'll notice that your legs start to get very, very active when you're engaging the transverse arch. Now the next step is to engage it without going through that action of lifting the three toes or pointing the big toe up. Just anchor the big toe, flare little toes, take the little toe down, and then keep the activation even as your toes rest lightly on the floor. So this is an activated arch that's collapsed. So leaning over, supporting some weight with your hands on your thighs, the knees bent slightly. Pick one leg. Let's pick the right leg. Bend the left knee a little. Focus on the right leg, straighten the right leg, but don't hyperextend it. Root through the ball of the big toe, spread the little toes wide, activate the arches, and you want to pull the shin up until it lines up right through the center of the heel. If you let the arch collapse, the shin comes through the inner heel, and if you lift the arch, the shin lines up through the center of the ankle. That's what we're looking for. Now try to do that with both legs. Root through the balls of the big toes, flare little toes wide, lift the arches until the shins line up through the center of the ankle joint, and then try to maintain that with less effort, without clenching, without cramping. There's kind of a softness there. Some of you may already know how to do this. Some of you may just be natural, where you learn almost instantly. Most people will struggle with this for a while. So in your practice, every time you think about it, anytime you're barefoot, great practice to just focus on trying to activate and lift your arches. Now, when I do that, if you take a closer look at this ankle, if you look at that ankle and compare it to this ankle, instinctively, can you see that this ankle is going to last longer, all things even, than that ankle? The problem here is that in order to lift this ankle and lift the arch and line up the shin, I'm using these powerful muscles in the quadriceps IT bands, and I'm pulling up and out on my thigh. So now, as I watch my thigh and my kneecap, as I lift my arch, what is my thigh doing? My knee is now turning out. Now, I root through the ball of the big toe. I pull up and out on the thigh. I go back, I go forth, and then I do both simultaneously. Okay. And that creates a really nice structure in the arch, the foundation of the pose that we can build on. So that's a spiraling action. Rooting down through the ball of the big toe, pulling up and out on the thigh. The problem is that without the bandhas, I've just shifted the problems up into the core, because if I do that with both legs, watch my knees, my ankles are collapsed, I lift the arches, and you can see now the knees are turning out. Not only that, the buttocks are clenching. So I'm creating some new problems here that I need to counter. So let's come back to sitting. The counter for this is going to be the bandhas. And so to learn the bandhas, it's probably best to learn them in a seated position. So take a few moments to get comfortable. Draw the flesh out from under the sit bones, tilt the pelvis forward. Lengthen up, open, broaden. Take a breath or two. So we'll start with the first bandha, the root lock, Mula bandha. The Mula bandha is the bandha at the floor of the pelvis. In yoga, the bandhas are talked as energetic locks, but there's a physical component too. And we're going to just focus on the physical aspects. In pranayama and some advanced meditation, they begin to use the bandhas at a whole different level. But when you're learning about the bandhas, and for an asana class, we use them, the physical manifestation of the bandha. So the pelvic floor tends to be an area of the body that most people pay little attention to. For most women, you'll hear, have been introduced to the idea of Kegel, the pelvic floor exercises. Most men have probably never been told by their doctor to strengthen the pelvic floor. And so for men, it's even more important to learn how to pay attention to this area and how to build awareness and strength in the pelvic floor. For men, it's especially important for maintaining health of the prostate as we grow older. For women, you probably have heard all your life all the different reasons for women that it's important. So we're going to do a bandha that's going to be a sweeping action. We're going to start at the back of the pelvic floor, sweep into the central pelvic floor, the front pelvic floor, and then we'll release. And the best way I found of learning this is to use an imaginary marble. So if you imagine sitting on top of an imaginary marble, and then with your sphincter muscles picking up the marble and then lifting it up. Okay? Imagine drawing the marble up into the colon and then lowering it down. Now at first, if you can just get some action, that's fantastic. Okay? However, we want to define or to refine our awareness and our connection to the pelvic floor. So the next step is to bring some subtlety into this. So this time, as you pick up the marble, I want you just to hold the marble, the sphincter muscles, but don't lift it off the ground. Then barely lift the marble, then lift it up 50% of the way, and then see how high can you draw this imaginary marble, really working a little bit more. Then lower the marble halfway, 90% of the way, touch it to the floor without letting go of it, and then release it, grip it, release it, grip it, lift it. So we want to get in the habit of not only being able to engage the pelvic floor, but to control how we engage it, whether we're engaging it 10% or 80% or 20%, and how to move up and down. So lifting and lowering that imaginary marble. Now move the marble forward to the central floor of the pelvis. And this time imagine you can draw the marble straight up through the center of the floor of the pelvis. When you're ready, lift, lower, release. And then go through the same process. Hold the marble, lift the marble slightly, lift it 50%, 30%, 70%, 50%, 90%, 10%, touch it to the floor, let it go, pick it up, lift it, set it down, let it go. Now come forward to the front floor of the pelvis, the area just behind the pubic bone, and this time from that area, pick up your marble and then lift it up and back slightly, mainly up, and then lower it down and release. And then go through the same process. Lift the marble slightly, lift it 50%, 90%, 20%, 70%, touch it to the floor, lift it off barely, touch it to the floor, let it go, pick it up, let it go. Okay. Now we're ready to do a sweep. You start with the first marble, and as it starts to lift, you pick up the second marble, and as both marbles continue lifting, you pick up the third marble until you've lifted all three. So start at the back floor of the pelvis with the sphincter muscles, pick up your first marble. Now lift the central marble to join, and as you continue lifting both the first and second marble, engage the third marble, and then lift the entire floor of the pelvis. Now, as you lift and hold, and for this exercise, lift fairly strongly, notice what happens just above the pubic bone. And you should feel naturally that your body starts to tighten right down here, just above the pubic bone. You should feel an engagement, a firming up there, okay? And that's what we're looking for, because that leads us into the second bandha, Uddiyana bandha, which is the abdomen. So go ahead and release all three marbles down and relax the pelvic floor. It's equally important to be able to relax it as it is to contract. It's contraction squeezes the blood and the energy, the prana, out of those areas, and then as we relax, fresh blood, fresh nutrients, prana enters into these areas. So if you are chronically tight, it would be like living with your arm extended. These muscles would deteriorate, degenerate, and get unhealthy and painful and weak. And same thing with the pelvic floor. Keeping it chronically tight is just as bad as being chronically flaccid. We want to be able to undulate, just like the heart beats. We want to be able to undulate the floor of the pelvis to keep it healthy. So now let's take a look at the second bandha. The second bandha is around the abdominal core. And here we want to learn how to engage the transverse muscle and de-emphasize abdominal recti. Abdominal recti run vertically, so do erectus spinae. Erectus spinae in the back run up and down the back, abdominal recti run up and down the front. And as in the nature of a muscle, when it engages, it contracts. When it contracts, it gets shorter. And if the muscles going up and down the front get shorter, they pull you forward and down towards fetal position. And if the muscles in the back contract, they pull you back and down. In both cases, the spine is being crushed. Okay? With most people, both sets of muscles are chronically tight, which means the vertebrae are being pulled together, squeezed, and then the discs trapped in between the vertebrae are being crushed. Then you start twisting and you develop back problems. So learning how to release the vertical muscles which contract the spine, and engage the horizontal, the transverse, which creates extension in the spine. So we want to engage the transverse, but we also want to release abdominal recti and release the erector spinae muscles at the same time. When we do that, we get this wonderful lengthening of the spine. Okay? So one way to begin to figure out how to do that is to draw the abdomen in. The problem with that instruction is that if I draw the navel in, I can use abdominal recti, the vertical muscle, to pull the navel in. It creates this shape here. Okay? It pulls the chest down as we pull the navel in. See if you can feel that. Pull the belly in and curl the upper body forward, and you'll feel that abdominal recti gripping. Kind of like if you're doing a sit-up, you're engaging that muscle. Okay? Now release. So, if on the other hand you actively lengthen the spine and let that be your primary goal, lengthening the spine, and then secondarily draw the navel in, without losing the extension, the brain has to recruit a different muscle to pull the navel in, and it will find the transverse muscle to draw the abdomen in. That's what we're looking for. So, lift your chest, and as you keep lifting the chest, pull the solar plexus and the navel, pull in, and lift your chest. Now when you do that, you should feel something around here, around your waist, that starts to get tired after a little bit. Especially if you're really working hard, you'll feel this area here get tired. That's the transverse muscle. That is your best friend. That is the muscle that prevents low back injuries, or helps to. If you think about a weightlifter putting on a leather belt before they pick up 500 pounds, that leather belt does the same thing the transverse does. So if we strengthen our transverse, it's like having our own personal leather belt around our abdomen, keeping the extension, preventing low back blowouts. Now, to get the best effect though, we want to start that contraction from the pubic bone and then draw up to the solar plexus. So let's introduce Mula Bandha, and we'll hold Mula Bandha and then add Uddiyana Bandha. So let's begin. Pick up the first marble, second marble, third marble, and as you lift all three marbles, notice where do you feel tightening down here at the just above the pubic bone. Notice where do you feel that first contraction, that muscle that says I want to help, and then from there begin to, as you lift the chest, begin to draw up, firming up from that pubic bone up to the solar plexus as you lift the chest up. Then think about broadening the kidneys and hollowing the navel. Spread the back, hollow the abdomen, lift the chest. Okay. And at first you may get tired very quickly. That's a good thing because it means you're working the muscles, and as you work those muscles to fatigue, they'll get stronger, and as they get stronger they won't fatigue as easily. Okay. Now relax. Okay. So that's the first and the second bandha, and the third bandha is the throat. Okay. Jalahandra, sometimes called a chin lock. Traditionally, this is usually not taught that often. When it is, it's usually taught with advanced pranayama, where a very strong chin lock is engaged. But you can do it at a much more subtle level, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So here, we draw not the head, but the base of the throat back, and lift the chest up. And you're lifting the chest towards the chin. So the distance between your chest and your chin is diminishing, and the base of the throat is drawing back. Now if you exaggerate it, the chest reaches up to the chin, and you pull the chin back into the throat. Okay. However, that's mainly for advanced pranayama when we're trying to control energy. So for our purposes, for posture, we want it to be much more subtle. So, float the chest, draw the base of the throat back, lengthen up through the back of the neck. Anyone that's studied Alexander technique, this will be very familiar to you. They use that idea of the rainbow coming up the top of out of the back of the head, and extend it over, and you lengthen along that rainbow. Okay, floating up. Now we put all three together, and we get really good posture through the core. Okay, pick up your three marbles, but this time just enough that you feel the lower abdomen firming up slightly. And then just very gently firm the abdomen and float the chest. Lift the pelvic floor at maybe 30%, 20 to 30% of capacity. Firm up the abdomen 20%. Float the chest 20% effort. And then to that, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Sink the shoulder blades. And then notice how that feels. So how do we measure the quality of our engagement? Okay? And there's two good measurements. One is the freedom of movement in the head, and the other is the quality of our breathing. Okay? So let's experiment. I want you deliberately to slump. Okay? Let your chest come forward and down. Let your shoulders come forward slightly. Don't exaggerate too much, just a slight exaggeration. Imagine 30 years from now, if you never did any yoga and you were bored watching TV and tired, how might you sit? Okay? Now in that position, try, without hurting yourself, try turning your head and just notice how far can you turn your head before it starts to feel awkward. Now come back to center. Okay? Now engage the bandhas, but very lightly. Lift the pelvic floor, just 10-20% effort. Firm up the abdomen, 10-20% effort. Float the chest. Draw the throat back. Lengthen through the back of the neck. Let go of the effort without losing the posture. And then turn your head. And see if you can feel the difference. Now what happens if we use too much bandha? So this time, continue to lift the pelvic floor really strongly. Firm up the abdomen, 80%, lift the chest, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Now work those. Now try turning your head. And so you'll see that at either extreme, working too hard or slumping, at either extreme, the neck loses its freedom. So this time, I want you to use the bandhas in order to create the greatest sense of freedom in the rotation of the neck, where your head floats. And just notice how far does it rotate without any restriction. So it's the second way of measuring that perfect balance of bandhas. The breath. Once again, slump. Breathe in, breathe out, pause. And then notice when you get ready to breathe in again, what happens to the urge to breathe in and what happens to your ability to breathe in. And what you may notice is the body will slip into a very shallow breath and sometimes stop breathing altogether and then take a shallow breath. And this is very unhealthy. It speeds up, in my opinion, it helps lead to all kinds of degenerative diseases of the nervous system, especially the brain, like Alzheimer's. They've already found that low oxygen to the brain is one of the leading causes for senility in elderly patients. And posture is intimately tied to breath, and breath, of course, is at the heart of oxygenation. Okay? So now, what happens to our ability to breathe if we try too hard? Pick up your 3 marbles, 90%, firm up the abdomen, lift the chest, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Now, try to breathe. And you'll notice that this extreme breath is compressed as well. Okay? Slump. Now, find the space in between being lazy and trying too hard. Lift the pelvic floor slightly, firm the abdomen, float the chest, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Now breathe. Now it's up to you to experiment. A little more here, a little less there, until you reach the maximum freedom for breathing. So try lifting the pelvic floor 10% more. Maybe 5% less in the abdomen, maybe 20% more in the chest and in the Jalandhara, in the chin lock. And then notice how does that affect it. And then ease up here, firm up there, breathe again. And you're looking for the posture that permits the greatest freedom of breath, where even if you aren't thinking about it, the body will continue to breathe smoothly and fluidly. Put that together and you'll probably notice that the position that permits the greatest freedom of movement and ease and grace of movement of the neck is pretty similar to the position that permits the greatest freedom of breath. Okay? And that is your target posture for the bandhas. Okay. Now we're sitting, so let's talk about the arm and the arches of the hands, and then we'll come up to standing and begin working with some standing poses and taking this and seeing how it works and how it feels in some of our standing poses. Okay. So with the arms, what I want you to start with is just extending one arm out in front of you. Okay. And actually we'll take it out maybe 45 degrees. Now rotate your palm until you feel your shoulder rotating, the chest lifting, and the shoulder blades sinking. Okay. Now, without losing that, so the upper arm is rotating externally. Without losing that, see if you can turn your palm until it faces down. So your hand is rotating in one direction, the upper arm is rotating in the opposite direction, and that is the spiral that we need in downward facing dog and handstands, anytime our hands are anchored, even cat-cow. All of these poses, this is the spiral in the arms. The upper arm is turning out, the hand is turning in. Try it on the other arm. Hold your arm up at 45 degrees. Rotate the palm until the chest lifts, the shoulder blade sinks, and then without losing that rotation, turn just the palm in and rotate the arm out. With a little practice, you'll be able to rotate the arm one direction and rotate your hand the opposite direction at the same time. And when you figure that out, you'll begin to realize that you're moving now from the core, from the back, not from the hand. Okay? And that's good because we want to control our poses from the upper back, from the chest, from the abdomen, from the core, from the hips, from the shoulder blades, not from the feet, not from the hands. Okay? We initiate movement, we control movement from the core. This cuts down on all kinds of problems, including tendinitis, bursitis, all of those joint problems. Most of those will start to resolve or at least improve slightly, some of them dramatically. More importantly though, if you learn this before you're injured, it prevents those things from becoming issues or has that tendency. Okay? So with both arms, the hands spiral in. So rotate your palms in, so your index fingers are rotating towards each other, and then with your upper arm, bend your elbows a little bit and then roll your elbows down and towards each other, and then turn your index fingers towards each other. So with your palms, they rotate in and the elbows rotate in. Now try that with the arms straight. And what you'll notice is a firming up of your upper body. The back, the chest become very active in the pose. Okay? That is this spiral. Now when we're in a balanced pose or Tadasana, downward facing dog, where our hands are on the ground, Tadasana with the feet, we root through the ball of the big toe, or in this case the ball of the index finger, rooting down. And then the upper arm rotates out and we spiral and extend. So let's try that with one arm. I want you to reach forward, and as you reach forward, rotate in. And then from the shoulder, pull back and draw the shoulder blade down and back. Now emphasize reaching forward and in with the palm. Now from the shoulder, pull down and back. Go back and forth, and then do both at the same time. Pull down and back on the shoulder, and then without losing that, push forward and rotate in with the palm. Try it with the other arm. Go back and forth, spiral forward and in, pull back and out, and then keeping that shoulder engaged, spiral in, spiral the arm. Now right now you may be thinking about two different actions. The index finger spiraling away and in, the shoulder pulling back and out. Okay? But what I want you to do is think of it not as two separate opposite actions, but one thing, an expanding spiral. Spiral the arm. And that's what we want to kind of do with our mind, is learn how to think of this not as two opposite actions, but as one thing, a spiral. Okay? Now, we'll come to a standing position in a few moments, and we'll take a closer look at Tadasana and some other poses. While we're sitting, take a few moments just to do a little twist. Take your right shoulder, reach your arm behind, cross the left hand, lift, expand, rotate. If you want to play with the bandhas, you can lift the pelvic floor slightly, firm the abdomen slightly, float the chest, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, and then notice how if you do it just right, it increases the range of motion of your head. And then into this position, breathe deeply. 2 or 3 more breaths. One more breath. Come back to center, switching sides. Leading with your left shoulder, reach around, cross the right hand, lift, expand, rotate, and then breathing into the second side. Again, employing the 3 bandhas, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara, and using those 3 locks to enhance your freedom to rotate. Come back to center, circle with the ribs. Reverse. Roll out the shoulders. Cat-cow. Lift the tailbone, open the belly, the chest, look up, finish breathing in. As you start to breathe out, tuck the tailbone, round the low back, mid back, upper back, tuck the chin, finish exhaling. On your own, 5 or 10 repetitions. And back to neutral. While we're here, let's look at spiraling the arms in this pose. So rotate down and in through the knuckle of the index finger, pushing down so the weight shifts into that point. And then without losing that, bend the elbows a little bit and try and roll the elbows towards your knees and then towards each other. Now as you try and rotate with the elbows bent slightly, try and take the elbows back towards your knees, the weight is going to shift to the outer heel of your hand. So spiral down through the knuckle of the index finger as you rotate the elbows in. And then as you do that, pay attention to what you're doing in your upper back, shoulders and chest to create that spiral. And then focus on that action in the upper body. When we do down dog, that's where you'll be moving from. Now from here, let's come up into a standing forward bend. Tuck your toes under, walk your hands in close to the knees, lift your hips, standing forward bend. In this position, take a few breaths. Bend the left knee, and then work with your right arch. Root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on the thigh. Spiral the leg. Switch sides. Whichever hamstring you're stretching, try to create a spiral, rooting through the ball of the big toe as you lift the arch. Go back and forth. Over time, days, weeks, maybe even months, you'll become more conscious of these parts of your body, and this will become natural and easy. At first, though, it requires some concentration. Now try both legs simultaneously. Root through the ball of the big toes, lift the arches. Sink the belly, lift the tailbone, stretch out the hamstrings, another breath or 2. And then when you're ready, roll up, letting your knees buckle, stacking the vertebrae, coming up to a comfortable standing position. Anchor the big toe, flare little toes wide. Okay. So now let's take a look at what happens in the low back when we activate that spiral strongly. Root through the ball of the big toe, and then from your quadriceps, pull up on the kneecaps and externally rotate the thighs. Now, as you do both, the legs spiral and the arches are lifted, but notice how the knees are now turned out and how the buttocks are beginning to tighten. Okay, good. So, we've taken care of the ankles, but we've created new problems higher up the chain. So this is where the bandhas come in. Let go of the spiral of the legs and just try the 3 bandhas with the core. Don't worry about anything else. So from a standing position, pick up the 3 marbles, firm the abdomen, float the chest, bring the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, broaden through the shoulder girdle, and then do so in such a way that it feels organic, not with a stylized effort. Collapse. And then this time, just enough action to get the result. Minimal amount of effort for maximum results. Lift the 3 marbles, firm the abdomen, float the chest, bring the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, broaden through the shoulder girdle, open through the heart, knees bent slightly. Now, what happens if we engage the bandha more strongly? So now pick up your 3 marbles at 80%, 90% effort, and then draw the navel in and lift the chest. Okay. Spread the kidneys, and what you're looking for is to feel the heels push out on the sticky mat. And your kneecaps will start to turn in. Your thighs will turn in, the kneecaps will turn in, the back will expand. Okay? And then relax. Now that action counters the action of the spiral, and when we put it all together, we end up with good posture. So as we pull up and out on the thighs, it contracts the back and the knees turn out. As we engage Uddiyana Bandha, the thighs turn in, the back releases and widens, and the knees turn in. If we balance and do both simultaneously, the knees point straight ahead, the back is wide, the abdomen is firm. Okay? So, without getting frustrated, let's go through this and put it all together. Root through the balls of the toes, lift the arches. Lift the quads until you feel the knees starting to turn out and the buttocks engage slightly. Now pick up your 3 marbles. Now draw in the abdomen and lift the chest and let the transverse muscle open the back. Hollow the abdomen, float the chest, draw the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, sink the shoulder blades, broaden through the shoulder girdle, knees soft, not clenching. Now let go of the effort without losing the posture. Don't drop anything. Just go from 10% to 5%, or from 30% to 10. Wherever you're working, work less without collapsing, until you've got just the bare minimum to maintain a sense of expansiveness. Now breathe. Now rotate your head. There should be a floating quality to the movement and an effortlessness to the breathing. Now, as we do this, we want to make sure that we don't start to tighten up the erector spinae in the back. So one more time, just working with the Uddiyana Bandha. You're going to lift the chest, draw the abdomen in, but at the same time, I want you to let your tailbone release down. Don't tuck it. Just release the tailbone down, lift the chest up, and draw the abdomen in slightly. Okay. So we keep a little bit of length, not flattening the back, but just lengthening the back slightly, lifting the chest and lengthening the front. So the two vertical muscles, abdominal recti in the front, erectus spinae in the back, both sets of muscles are releasing to allow extension, and the horizontal muscle is firming up. Now let's try that all together again in Tadasana, and then we'll begin moving. Set up your feet, spread the toes, lift the arches, spiral the legs until you feel the buttocks clenching a little bit. Mula Bandha, lift the pelvic floor. Uddiyana Bandha, firm up the abdomen until you feel the buttocks releasing and the back broadening. Float the chest, let the tailbone release down, float the chest up, bring the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, broaden through the shoulders. And now notice, where are you working too hard and where have you dropped the action? Where have you lost the action? You want to be engaged across all of the different areas. The arches, the spirals, the bandhas, all of them doing their part without anything dominating. Knees soft and bent, ever so slightly, just so they aren't locking. Now bring your attention to your breathing, smooth, fluid, steady. Bring your hands to prayer position. On your next inhale, Vinyasa Sun Salutation, sweep up and firm up the abdomen a little bit more as you raise your arms overhead. Float into a forward bend on the exhale. Roll up, buckle the knees, stack the vertebrae. 2 or 3 more times. Just bringing a little movement in with the breath. Coming back to Tadasana. Now let's look at the overhead stretch. As we raise our arms overhead, if we're thinking about our hands, then we lose awareness of our hips, and this is the tendency. The hips and the belly come forward as the hands come back. Okay? So instead, as you start to feel the first hint of resistance, where you start to feel a little bit of resistance in the shoulder, you begin to engage a little bit more firmly with Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. So float the arms out and up, and then begin to lift the pelvic floor a little bit more. So instead of 10%, maybe 30%, and then firm up the abdomen, lift the chest, maybe 30-40%. Now as you continue to bring your arms up, begin thinking about taking not your hands, but your shoulder blades or your inner armpits back, your chest forward and up, the base of the neck back. Jalahandra, the chin lock. And firm up the abdomen even more. The shoulder blades move back, the chest moves forward. The tailbone releases down, not tucking. Tucking the tailbone tightens the front of the body. We want to release the back without tightening the front. Now a few more sun salutations. Simple Vini Yoga to start with. Release on your exhale. Roll up. Strengthen the bandhas as you start to work the overhead stretch, and then release. 5 or 6 more times. Really focus on the arches, the spirals of the legs, and especially the bandhas, and using them to support you in this Vini Yoga Sun Salutation. On your next repetition, hold the overhead stretch. The bandhas nice and firm to support the core, the tailbones releasing down, the chest lifting, the abdomen firm. Add a side stretch, lift the left heel, flare the right ribs, go side to side. A little bit stronger back bend now if it feels good. Engage the bandhas more strongly. The further back you're working, the more strongly you're engaging the bandhas. Lifting the chest, lifting the pelvic floor, firming the abdomen. Drawing the base of the neck back, lengthening the back of the neck. Take a breath or two. Supported forward bend. Either stay there or release into a forward fold, 2 or 3 breaths. Stretch the exhale. One more breath. And coming back upright. Okay. So now we'll see how the bandhas and the spirals work in a stronger pose. We'll work with chair pose. So before you even come into chair pose, start with the arches. Root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on the quadriceps, spiral the legs until the arches are perfect. Now, take care of the hips. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, sink the tailbone, spread the kidneys, hollow the abdomen. The back expands, the abdomen hollows, the chest lifts, the base of the neck draws back, the back of the neck lifts up, and the tailbone sinks. And the abdomen is firm. Keeping that, float the arms overhead, and then take not the hands, but the shoulder blades back. Let the hands follow. Then holding on to all of that, come into a 10% chair pose. Bend the knees 10%, tilt forward 10%, reach the hips back 10%. Now work on the arches, work on the spiral, work on the bandhas. Then, if that's difficult, just keep practicing the arches, the spirals, the bandhas. If, however, you think you've got all of those working well for you, take them with you as you go a little deeper into the pose. 5 or 6 breaths. If you need a good workout today, open up the throttle and reach the hips back and down. Work the bandhas, work the spirals, work the arches, the foundation. One more breath. Stretch up on an inhale, float the arms out. Walk your way down halfway, pause. Take a breath or two. Stretch the exhale. One more breath. And then if it feels okay, lean in. Couple more breaths, leaning into a deeper stretch for the hamstrings. Roll back up. One more time. Root through the feet. Lift the arches, spiral the legs. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, chin back, lengthen up through the back of the neck, float the arms overhead. As you pull the shoulder blades back, take the chest forward and up. As you lift the chest, sink the tailbone, holding on to all of that. Work your way deeper. This will be our last chair pose. 4 or 5 breaths. Couple more breaths. Come into a supported forward bend. And either stay there or release. 2 or 3 breaths. One more breath. And roll back up to standing. Stepping your feet nice and wide for Trikonasana, triangle pose. Turn the left foot out. Turn the right foot in. Lift the heel, take it wide, set it down. Now, if we do exactly what we've been doing in Tadasana, and we bring all of that into triangle pose, you get a very solid Trikonasana. Start by rooting down through the base of your big toe. If you need to, point your big toe up to the ceiling and push through the ball of the big toe just to find the arch, and then let the toe come back to the ground without letting the arch collapse. Now as you pull up and externally rotate your thigh, your knee will start to turn to the outside. And then if you root through the ball of the big toe, the knee will start to turn in. Go back and forth, then do both. Now as you do that, see if you can do the same thing on the back leg. It's not as important, but we don't want to neglect it. So if you can maintain the spiral in the left leg easily, then spiral the right leg too. Shift your hips, tilt the pelvis. Shoulders back. Lift the 3 marbles, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha. Draw the abdomen in, sink the tailbone, float the chest, Jalahandra, pull the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, and then turning your head slightly. Now keep going through the pose, emphasizing those key aspects of the pose we're covering today. Root through the balls of the big toes, pull up and out on the thighs. Once you create that spiral, think of it as a spiral, not 2 actions, but 1 action. Keeping the spiral, shift your hips, tilt the pelvis, and then Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalahandra, the 3 bandhas, the locks. Couple more breaths. Switching sides when you're ready. Turn the right foot out. Lift the left heel, take it wide, set it down. Spread the toes on both feet. Root through the ball of the big toe. Pull up and out on the thigh. Go back and forth, and then do both at the same time, creating a spiral in the right leg. And then, if that's easy, spiral the left leg too. Shift your hips to the left. Tilt the pelvis. Pick up your 3 marbles, firm the abdomen, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, broaden through the shoulders, turn your head slightly, and then cycle through the pose, rooting through the arches, spiraling the legs, engaging the bandhas, and holding on to all of those actions, exploring how to best use those actions in service to Trikonasana. 3 or 4 breaths. One more breath. Come back to center. Turn the feet pigeon-toed. Release into a forward bend. Take a few breaths. Breathe deep. Stretch the exhale. One more breath. Then step your feet together. Take another breath or 2, stretching the hamstrings. And then roll back up to standing. Okay. Vipadasana 2. Step up with your left foot. Step the right leg back into a deep lunge as you bend the left knee. Good. Okay. Now, straighten the left leg. Spiral the left leg. Root through the ball of the big toe. Pull up and externally rotate the thigh. Do both simultaneously, creating a spiral. Now bend your knee 5 degrees and then reestablish that spiral. Then bend your knee 10 degrees without losing the spiral. And then continue coming into the pose without losing the spiral. The upper thigh rolling out, rooting through the ball of the big toe. until the knee is directly above the heel. Square up your shoulders with your hips. Straighten the back leg, strengthen the back leg, spiral the back leg, sink into the back hip, lift the 3 marbles, Mula Bandha. Engage from the pubic bone, draw up to the sternum, firming up the transverse as you lift the chest, sink the tailbone. Don't tuck the tailbone. Instead, lift the chest, firm up the abdomen, let the tailbone just release down slightly. Lift the chest, bring the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, float the arms out, turn your head. Now as you hold the pose, scan. Start with the left foot. Root through the ball of the big toe, lift the arches, spiral the leg. If you've forgotten how to spiral the leg, straighten it, spiral it, and then without losing the spiral, bend back into the pose. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, float the chest, reposition the neck, and rotate the head. 2 or 3 more breaths. Don't forget the back leg, spiraling as well. 1 more breath. And stepping up to the front of your mat. And then take the left foot back. Step the right foot forward. Bend the right knee. Check your alignment of your feet. Straighten the right leg. Root through the ball of the big toe. Lift the arches. Externally rotate the thigh. Spiral the right leg. Bend 5% without losing the spiral. 10%, 30%. Take the spiral with you into the pose. Without losing that, square up shoulders with hips, straighten the back leg, strengthen the back leg, sink into the back hip, float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart. Pick up your 3 marbles, firm the abdomen, lift the chest, sink the tailbone, throat back, lengthen through the back of the neck. And then breathing into this pose as you go back through the pose, starting with the right foot. Engaging the arch, spiraling the leg, engaging the bandhas, breathing. 3 or 4 more breaths. One more breath. Finishing with a forward bend. Stretch the exhale into a sigh. Take a breath or 2. Next we'll be working with a back roll. If you have your own roller, take a moment to set it up. If you don't, take a blanket, fold it long and thin, roll it up really, really tight, keeping the middle part as firm as you can get it. Those of you that haven't done this before, to make it easier, unroll the blanket. To make it more challenging, roll it up further. Start with the roller underneath your shoulders. Arms and head extended. This is supposed to be comfortable. You can support the head with your arms, or you can fold up a blanket and put it under your head or under your arms. As long as you can relax comfortably, that's all that matters. Now breathe into this position. Stretch the exhale. Every 5 or 10 breaths, lift the hips, push yourself over the roller an inch or two, and then set the hips down and relax into the new position. Each time you adjust, you should feel the roller shifting down the length of the spine. So the roller starts close to the neck, and in about 3 more minutes we'll end up with the roller close to the hips. Breathe deep. If you remember from several weeks ago the complete back breath, you can use that. Again, every 5 or 6 breaths, lifting the hips, adjusting, setting the hips down. Go for 2 more minutes. If you've already finished, go back to a favorite spot. Ten or 15 breaths. When you're finished, lift the hips, remove the roller. Draw the knees in to your chest, rock side to side. Now we'll try bridge pose, but with an emphasis on the bandhas. And notice how the bandhas in each different pose, the same bandhas, serve to support and protect the body. Bring the feet in close to the hips, hip width apart, outer edges parallel. Anchor the big toes, spread the toes wide, root through the base ball of the big toe, and spiral the legs slightly. Don't worry about the legs as much for today. I really want you to focus on Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara. Take the back of your head with your hands, lift it with your hands, and then pull it away from your shoulders, and then set it down one vertebra at a time so the neck touches the floor before the head. And you'll notice that you are in a very similar Jalandhara. You're in the chin lock position now. The back and neck lengthening, the chin coming closer to the chest. When we come into bridge, the chest will come closer to the chin. Now from here, the hands can grab the ankles, you can interlace your fingers beneath you, you can grab your pelvis when it comes up, or you can press your palms into the floor. Any arm variation you're familiar with is fine. What I want you to focus on is the core and the bandhas. Pick up your 3 marbles, then from the pubic bone, firm up like a zipper closing, firm up from the pubic bone all the way up to the solar plexus. Draw the sides in, spread the kidneys. Let the tailbone release away from the head. And then, without losing any of that action, begin to lift your hips. If you're new to this pose, or if you have any contraindicated conditions where inversions aren't recommended for you, or if you have very sensitive neck, don't lift high, just a few inches. For those of you that want to continue lifting, see if you can continue to lift without releasing Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. Now take 5 or 6 breaths, and again, any arm position that you want is fine. If you aren't sure, you can use your hands to support the pelvis. One more breath. Now that you're up, the spiral on the legs is a little more important. Root through the ball of the big toe and pull up and out on the quadriceps. Spiral the legs. And then starting back down. Now try to keep the Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha engaged until after your kidneys touch the floor. And then release and rest. Take a breath or two. We'll try that again in a moment. One more breath. Position your feet. Position your head. Lift and lengthen the back of the neck. Setting it down. Pick up the 3 marbles. Curl the tailbone off the floor. Engage Uddiyana Bandha. Draw the navel in, spread the kidneys wide until you feel the transverse muscle working, and then continue lifting just a few inches, or for those that want to lift further, go ahead and come up into a full bridge. As you come up into bridge, you can begin to bring a little more attention into the legs, pressing down through the ball of the big toe, pulling up and out on the thighs. Let the tailbone release away as you firm the abdomen and bring the chest towards the chin. 2 or 3 breaths. One more breath. Now try to keep Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha engaged as you're coming down. Try to keep your hips off the ground until after the kidneys touch. Then draw one knee in, hug it, and pull the opposite knee in and hug both knees, rock side to side. Take a breath or 2. Stretch the exhale. Now coming up to table, roll to one side, come up to your hands and knees. And we'll start in table and then move into downward facing dog. So pay particular attention to your hands, shoulder width or a little bit wider. Turn the little finger out, grip the floor with the little finger, and then rotate in until the middle finger points straight ahead. Set it down and then point the index finger in even further, and then press the knuckle of the index finger into the floor. Take the thumb wide and root. Now, bend the elbows 15 degrees, enough that you can see that they're bent. Now swing the elbows towards your knees and then continue swinging towards each other. And you'll feel the weight shift to the outside heel of your hand. So come back up, root through the knuckle of the index finger, and then without losing that rootedness, bend the elbows slightly and begin to rotate in without losing that anchor. And then notice how that feels in the shoulders, in the arms, in the back. Now tuck the tailbone, tuck the toes, lift the knees slightly, come back halfway towards down dog. Root through the knuckle of the index finger, spiral the arms, and then take that with you into downward facing dog. 2 or 3 breaths. One more breath. Coming down for any variation of cobra, locust, boat, or bow. Press the tops of the feet into the floor, shrug the shoulders, roll the shoulders up and back, reach the chest forward. 3 or 4 breaths. One more breath. Come up to table. Spiral the arms, and this time try to straighten the elbows. If you lose the spiral, if it doesn't make sense to you, bend the elbows, root, squeeze the elbows together, and then straighten the arms without losing that spiral. Now in down dog this time, we'll try to hold on to as much of that as we can. We're going to shift the focus to the legs and to spiraling the legs. Tuck the toes, lift the knees, draw your chest through towards your feet, spread the toes wide. Now try to root the front inner corner of your heel down without letting the arches collapse. So lift the arches and reach the front inner corner of your heel to the floor or towards the floor. Pull up and externally rotate the thighs. Spiral the legs, just like we did in Tadasana. If that's difficult, do one leg at a time. Spiral the left leg, lifting the arches, rooting through the ball of the big toe, front inner corner of the heel, lifting the arch, spiraling the leg, and then switching sides. And if you can do both legs at the same time, fine. Take another breath. And come down. Any version, cobra, locust, boat. Oh, this is our last work for the back muscles. 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 more breaths. We gotta do one last down dog. One more breath. Come back to table. So our final repetition with downward dog, we'll start with the arms, we'll add the legs, and then we're going to focus on the bandhas. If you can hold on to everything else and add the bandhas, fine. If not, focus on the bandhas. Don't worry whether or not you're able to hold on to the rest of the pose. Start with the arms. Spiral the arms. Keeping that, tuck the toes, lift the knees, reach the hips back. Lift the tailbone up. Now root through the feet and lift and externally rotate the thighs, spiral the legs, and then pick up your 3 marbles, Then hollow the abdomen, spread the kidneys, and bring all 3 bandhas into the pose. If you can't hold on to the rest of the pose, don't worry about it. Just keep the bandhas engaged as you practice down dog. When you're ready to start slowing down, pigeon pose, and you'll be leading with the right leg coming forward, sliding the left leg back. Looking for a delicate, gentle stretch in the outer thigh, hip, or the buttocks. Stretch the exhale. And take 2 or 3 breaths just adjusting, repositioning. Looking for where you get the least amount of discomfort, ideally no discomfort at all. And then adjusting for pleasure. Stretch the exhale, 5 or 10 more breaths. Two or 3 breaths. Push back into down dog. Take a breath or 2. And then bring the left knee forward. Slide the right leg back. Again, take a couple breaths, adjusting, repositioning. Trying to improve on the quality of the stretch. Not the intensity though, just the quality. Then turn your attention to breathing and relaxing, stretching the exhale. 5 or 10 breaths. Two or 3 breaths. Coming into a spinal twist. Any favorite twist is fine. If you aren't sure, bring the right knee, or for a more gentle, safer variation, bring both knees to your chest. Roll to the left, and then turn your upper body back to the right. If there's any pinching, any unhealthy or unpleasant sensations, begin experimenting, adjusting, repositioning. And if you can't find a position that feels comfortable and safe, just come back to center and hug both knees and rest for a few breaths. Five or 10 breaths. 2 or 3 more breaths. Switching sides when you're ready. Come back to center. Hug your left knee or both knees to your chest. Roll to the right. Turn the upper body back to the left. Again, make sure you feel safe and comfortable before you relax. Don't stay in any position that doesn't feel healthy and comfortable. Couple more breaths. And then hug both knees. Rock side to side. Then coming into Shavasana, the knees can be bent, or if you're comfortable, you can extend the legs. Check your body for symmetry. Feet spread evenly, a little wider than the hips. The palms turned up, the shoulder blades drawn together, the armpits open, and then the back of the neck long. And then most importantly, make any adjustments you need to be completely comfortable. And now engage all 3 bandhas and then release them, but at 1%, the most delicate engagement. Just enough that if you're paying attention, you can feel it. But you'd have to pay attention to notice it at all. When you're ready, pick up the first marble, second marble, third marble, firm the abdomen from the pubic bone to the sternum, lengthen the back of the neck, move the chest towards the chin, draw the shoulder blades down the back, and then release. And then do it as if it's a wave, starting from the tailbone and coming all the way up through the crown of the head. And then release. And one more time. And release. Now letting go of the bandhas. Relax the face, the neck, the shoulders. The arms, the hands, the fingers. The feet, the ankles, calves, knees, and thighs. Loosen hips, relax the buttocks, the low back, the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the back of the neck, and soften the throat. The jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth, and especially the eyeballs. The space behind, beneath, around the eyes. The eyelids, the eyebrows, the forehead. Temples soft and hollow. Scalp and the crown. Now slowly, lazily, yawning and stretching and pendiculating. And roll to one side. And coming up to a comfortable seated position. So the bandhas can be engaged strongly, like in a back bend or in something like chair pose, but you can also engage them very, very delicately, just 1%, in order to maintain good posture and prevent over time yourself kind of slumping. Just a 1% engagement, just consciousness of those areas will help to maintain an effortless, expansive posture that you can live in, that you can move your head freely, that you can breathe in, and where you'll age more gracefully. So it's not a question of building strength in these areas, it's a matter of becoming conscious of awareness and then control. And by control I don't mean vigorous, I mean subtle control of these energies. Okay? So wonderful to practice anytime you're sitting, talking, thinking, driving. You can practice these, and there is benefit to making them stronger too. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with working these just the same way you would work your back muscles or abdominal muscles or core. to make it stronger. You can work these actions to make them stronger, but the priority should be increased consciousness, increased awareness, and cultivating the habit of staying conscious of the bandhas, so that even when you aren't thinking about it, the bandhas are part of your posture. And then the fun is looking at how you can use the bandhas to support yourself in the more difficult and challenging poses. And the more familiar you become with them seated and standing, the easier it begins to see how you can use them in revolved triangle or Virabhadrasana 3 or extended lateral angle. You'll find that the same actions can be used in almost any pose to take your pose to a new level. I'd like to thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bringing your hands together over the heart. Namaste.